6 months ago, we began a journey. It was a journey through and to and about and all around and centered on the kingdom of God. And it's been 6 months, it's been 6 sermon series, it's been 23 sermons, and just all of that has taken us through this journey, this path, this experience that we've been on. And it all started way back when in August when we were coming back to school with our Back to the Future series. And it was us taking those first steps into following Christ. It was us taking those first steps into becoming citizens of this kingdom. And we didn't necessarily totally understand what we were doing, but we knew that Jesus was there and that we wanted to follow him, and that we were going to follow him on that journey, on that path, each and every step of the way. And from there, we got a rude awakening right away, because in the next series, Prepare, we had to be ready to be soldiers right away. Because as citizens, we also are soldiers. Whether we like it or not, we're going to be attacked. There's a good side and there's a bad side. And once we align ourselves with one of those sides, we're in the fray. So we were citizens, and then we were soldiers, and then we went to the end of all things. We started at the end. And this was us understanding what the kingdom was. It was all about heaven. And it was all about this kingdom that was up in the sky and that was down in the future and that was all over the place. And we had to try to figure out what this kingdom was that we were a part of as citizens and soldiers. And from there, in this kingdom, we found that there's this throne in the middle of it. And we had to understand from the beginning who it was that was going to sit on the throne. And that all culminated with Jesus coming to earth at Christmas time of all times and becoming the king in heaven, on earth, on the throne. Just everything right then and there was laid out before us. And this veil was torn at that moment in time between heaven and earth. And we had to go on from there, and we had to understand what it meant all of a sudden for that kingdom to not just be that kingdom that's up in the sky and down the future and all those other places, but to be right here, right now on earth. And we had to understand how we were going to walk in that whole new way. And then this series that we've been a part of, that we've been doing, I haven't tied in as much as intimately, but it's been about our transformation. It brings us full circle all the way back to understanding who we are as citizens in the kingdom of heaven. That we are being transformed into something brand new. And it started 2 weeks ago, and today we finished that 6-month journey that has brought us here to this moment in time. And we end it today because next week we're going to start something brand new. On Wednesday, we're going to start something brand new. But today we get to finish, and we get to just remember and experience this more than we ever thought before. And each and every Sunday of this one starts the same way. Abbot Lot came to Abbot Joseph and said, "Father, according as I am able, I keep my little rule, my little fast, my prayer, meditation, and contemplative silence. And according as I am able, I strive to cleanse my heart of thoughts. Now, what more should I do?" The elder rose up in reply and stretched out his hands to heaven. And his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said, "Why not be totally changed into fire? Why not go through this metamorphosis? Why not go through this experience where we're totally changed head to toe?" See, what happens here in this experience is one person comes to another and says, "I'm trying to live the good life. I'm trying to be the best Christian that I can be. I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. What more can I do?" And this other person says, "Stop worrying about doing quite so much. You're going to do those things, and that's important. Be something brand new. Be transformed from head to toe, from fingers to toes, all the way down, and be totally changed into fire. And in order to understand this week especially, we're going to start once again in Exodus chapter 33. Because each of these weeks we've talked about Moses. And the context for where we're coming at this week is the same as the recap that we can do. See, the first week was all about Moses coming down from Mount Sinai. And when he came down from Mount Sinai, he was coming out of this presence, this time, this experience with God that left him so radiated from that presence, from that glory, from that experience, that his face was shining. Somehow, some physical thing had taken place. That Moses' face was actually glowing like a light bulb, and it scared everybody in Israel. So he had to veil it. And there was this difference between how do we experience God and let that shine, but not scare people to death. And then last week we talked about Moses going up that mountain, and how at the top of this mountain was God as a consuming fire. This fire was eating this mountain. It was scary, and it was huge, and it was terrifying, and Moses walked right into it. Today we're going to talk about what happened while he was there. We're going to talk about in between him going up and him coming down. We're going to talk about Moses on Mount Sinai. Exodus chapter 33, starting at verse 17. The Lord said to Moses, we're coming in mid-conversation, but we'll see later on what the conversation's about. The Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing that you have asked. For you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name. We're going to pause there because it's easy to see those phrases and to know that they're familiar phrases and just to move on. But really think about that for a moment. Moses found favor in God's sight. God considered Moses a favorable human being. He invited him into his presence. This wasn't anything that Moses had earned or achieved. It was something that God saw fit to do. Moses had found favor. The etymology of this word, what's behind this, the Hebrew of this word, is the idea of somebody in a position of power bending low to somebody who is subservient, to a slave, to serve them. What an amazing moment in time. That God is bending low to serve Moses in this situation. This is the kind of favor that Moses has found. It's not this phrase that we move on from. It's this amazing moment in time. God is humbling himself to Moses. What an amazing thing that's happening here. And he knows him by name. God knows Moses' name. God knows your name. He knows who you are intimately, within, without, not just the things that you've done, but who you are as a being, as an entity. God knows you, and you still find favor in his sight. He still bows low to serve you, to be with you, to love you on that level. Just what an amazing moment in time. In verse 18, Moses takes it this whole other step. Moses' reply to this is, show me your glory, I pray. Whoa! Are you kidding me? Do you know what you're asking here? You just walked into a fire that's eating a mountain, and you want more? Are you kidding me, Moses? Show me your glory, I pray, says Moses. He comes to God with boldness. He comes to God with the audacity to ask for more and more. Moses, just like Abbot Lot says, I've been living this life, I've been doing these things, I understand your law at this point, we're going to do this. What more? What more should I do? What more can I be? How can I know you greater? How can I know you more? So he comes to God in this boldness and in this audacity. And God's reply is amazing. He says, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you the name Yahweh. I will be gracious on whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. God says, okay, we'll do this. We'll do this not because you're making me do this. We'll do this because I have bowed low to you. You have found favor in my sight. I want to know you more, just as you want to know me more, more and more and more. But, he says, you cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live. And the Lord continues, see, there's a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock. I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take my hand away, and you shall see my back. But my face shall not be seen. What a crazy instance that's happening here. What a crazy moment in time that's happening. Moses is going to physically see God. The form, the figure, whatever that is. Somehow there's all these physical attributes given to God, and Moses is going to see it. Wow. And it's such an amazing thing. And God's going along with this, and he's saying, yeah, let's do this thing, except you're going to explode if you see my face. You're just going to be a bloody spot there on the side of the mountain if I show you too much. I'll give you every bit as much as you can handle, and that's as much as you can handle. You're going to see my back. You're not going to see anything else. You're going to see my back. Because if you see my face, you're just going to be no more. You will die. So he gives them the instructions. He tells them how this is going to work. He gives him this safety moment. He gives him this cleft in the rock. He's going to protect him from his presence. And then he's going to unveil it before him. And continuing on into chapter 34, the Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the former ones. I will write the words on the tablets that were on the former tablets which you broke. Be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one shall come up with you. Do not let anyone be seen throughout all the mountain, and do not let flocks or herds graze in front of that mountain. This is more protection. This is more safety, because the presence of God will affect things and people and everything in its path in this huge way. So Moses did this. Moses did the things that he's supposed to do so that he could be what God wanted him to be, so that he could experience this intimacy and this presence with God. He cut the 2 tablets like the former ones. He rose early in the morning and went up on Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there, and proclaimed the name Yahweh. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, Yahweh, Yahweh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, yet by no means clearing the guilty, but visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Just to take a moment on that. Just to take a moment on that and talk about what he's doing, what he's revealing. God is revealing his glory, not even in fullness. And it's still this powerful moment, this strange, mysterious moment that's happening. And in the midst of that, God says, I'm not only going to show you what I am, I'm going to talk about who I am. And it's so easy for us to remember that God punishes those to the children and the 3rd and the 4th generation. And we like to quote that sometimes for those people that we know aren't doing the things that we want them to do. Those are the bad guys, and they'll be punished to the third and fourth generation. But before all that, God says, keeping steadfast love for the 1,000th generation. Yes, there is punishment. Yes, there is consequence for sin. Yes, those things will happen. But what is 3 to 4 generations compared to the enormity of what God's love is, of what God's glory is? That to the 1,000th generation, His love will still be pouring out and overflowing everything. And Moses' response to this is starting in verse 8. He quickly bowed his head toward the earth and worshipped. What more can you do in the presence of God when you see God, not even face to face? He said, if I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, I pray, let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity, pardon our sin, and take us for your inheritance. This is his response. His response is to bow down, to worship, to repent, and to request. He wants more. He wants to be more. He wants to stay with God. It's terrifying, and it's huge, and it's heavy, and yet we can't escape it. We need who this God is. We need what God is pouring out to that 1,000th generation for us, and we still want more. Moses started to seek God in boldness and audacity. And by the end of all things, he returned. He came out of this experience with humility, with honor, with respect. They came out of this experience with a renewal of the covenant. What goes on from here is God pours out this covenant again. He reestablishes the law that had been broken from those tablets. There's a general renewal of mission and purpose and direction. And this is what happens when Moses experiences God. To understand this a little bit more, turn to 1 Kings chapter 19. Because once again, to recap, last week we talked about Elijah, the same way that we talked about Moses the last 2 weeks. And with Elijah, what we talked about last week was that on Mount Carmel, in that place, Elijah was able to show a nation that God was a consuming fire. That God was right there and that He came down in flames to lick up this soaking, sopping wet sacrifice before Him. And there was this amazing victory, and He had won this fight for the soul of the nation. And what happens here as we get into verse 1, as we start off with chapter 19, is we're going to see that the first thing that happens basically right after this is Elijah, out of this victory, is going to run and flee in retreat. Ahab told Jezebel that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." See, at the end of that victory, he actually went and killed all of those prophets. They slayed all of those prophets. And she's saying, okay, I'm coming for you. That's what I'm going to do to you. Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank, and then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. Elijah's retreating. Elijah had that victory, and now he's scared, and he's retreating, and he knows he's retreating, and he knows that there's no honor in this, and that he's shown who God is. He's seen the fire of God fall from heaven to show a nation who he is, and yet in the midst of that, he still feels fear. He still feels terror at the persecution that's coming his way, at this one soul individual that's coming after him. So he runs away, and he flees, and he goes. And what happens is God still comes down, and God still ministers to him. There's an angel giving him instructions. There are things to do in order to be who he's going to be. There's serving. There's bowing low. The angel of the Lord is another way to say God at times. The angel of the Lord is basically God unto Elijah. He's coming down the way he came down to Moses. And he's saying, I know who you are, and it's going to be okay. And I'm going to feed you, and I'm going to nurture you, and we're going to get through this. And he brings him to Horeb, the Mount of God. Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. Elijah winds up smack dab at the same place that Moses was, so that we can experience this amazing thing. Verse 9, at that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Sound familiar? It should. He said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. But wait a minute, fire's everywhere. We're supposed to be changed into fire. God's supposed to be in the fire. God's supposed to be in the wind. The Spirit of God is wind and breath. God's supposed to be there. He's supposed to come and shake the earth, the foundations of the earth, and show his power to everybody, just like he did with Elijah, just like he did while he's eating the mountain as a consuming fire from Moses. This is the power of God that we're supposed to be experiencing. And yet, this time, he's not in any of those things. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. Another way to say that is a still, small voice. Just a whisper. Just a little whisper. In the midst of fire and earthquakes and shattering mountains and wind and rocks and everything going on, God comes in a still, small whisper. What an amazing thing. What a drastic change in God's revealing himself. In God coming to Elijah. And what does he say there? I don't know. What does he say? I lost my place entirely. The word of the Lord came to him. There we go. 13 is where I am. Sorry. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle, and he went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Because everything quiets down. He answered, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant. They have thrown down your altars and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. See, with Moses, we're given an example of how we should come into the presence of God on a daily basis, believe it or not. Sure, he's going up Mount Sinai. Sure, he's going up to that place. But what a better way to show what our daily devotional time with God can be. To wake up, to ascend to that only lonely, spending this solitary time with God, so that we can experience him and come down that mountain and go on with the rest of our day. That we can come in the boldness and the audacity that he'll be there when we come to seek him, and leave in the humility and the preparation to be able to go on with whatever our day has in store for us. With Elijah, we see all of those other moments in time. Those times where we are shattered, with fear, with overwhelming burdens of everyday life, with those things that we just can't go on anymore. And God comes to us and says, I will minister to you, I will serve you, and I will help you through this, and it will be okay. We will get through this. And all of those things are going to rage, and all of those storms are going to happen. And in the midst of everything, I'm going to come to you in a still, small whisper. And I'm going to show you that you're not alone. And when Elijah came down from this, God gave him exactly the same thing. A renewed sense of mission, of purpose, of direction. See, with Elijah, he went in and he sought God in humility, and he returned in boldness. He returned restored in this relationship and ready to go and do bigger and better and amazing things. There's one more example for us to follow, for us to see, for what's happening with us today. Matthew chapter 17. And again, I hope this sounds familiar. Matthew chapter 17, the context of... I'm not going to give the context of this. I'm going longer than I wanted to. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain. 6 days later, 40 days, 40 nights with Moses, 40 days, 40 nights with Elijah, 6 days and then on the 7th with Jesus. Led them up this high mountain, just like Sinai and Horeb, and here we are. These things are supposed to be in this place. All of what's happening here is supposed to happen the same way. And in verse 2, we see it all just blown up before us. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. And his clothes became dazzling white. In the New International Version, a lot of the translation, it says, he became as white as light. He's shining from head to toe. It's not just his face. Suddenly there appeared to him Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Get up and do not be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus alone. Jesus doesn't go up this mountain to meet God. Jesus goes up this mountain to be God. Suddenly, when we see Moses coming up to meet with God and to have this intimacy with God, and we see Elijah going up and meeting God and spending this intimacy with God, and Jesus goes up and he changes everything. He says, I'm not going up to meet the Father. I am God. He goes up the mountain, and not to see what this light is all about, not to see what this fire is all about, but to become that light, to become that fire, to become the glory and the fullness of who Jesus has always been. And Peter and James and John get a glimpse of this. And they're so blown away, they don't know what to do with this. That Peter talks about building tabernacles. Peter talks about worshiping all 3 of them. And this is a mistake. This is not what you're supposed to do. There's one, that dude in the middle that's shining brighter than everything, he's the one that you worship. Those other guys are just hanging out here too. Because they've experienced this, and they know this, and they are drawn to this light, just as you are drawn to this light. And we, as Peter, James, and John going up that mountain, have come this 6 months, this whole way, thinking that we're simply following this man, that we're simply following this person that has some amazing ideas and could be this Messiah, and he turns into light. What do you do with that? Everything changes, and he shows who he is in his fullness and in his glory. It's not just his face, it's his entire being. And just as on Sinai, this whole situation, this whole scenario is playing out, and it's Jesus alone. With God the Father in week 1, we learned that we could get close to the Father and we could be radiated by this light. We could be turned on by the presence of God. That our faces would come and that they would shine and that they would glow, and we could go out into the world and that we could be new creations. And that was all about metamorphosis. This is the next place that metamorphosis shows up. In Matthew and Mark's accounting of the transfiguration, the word transfiguration is metamorphosis. And it's that experiencing the fullness. It's not that he's changed from one thing into another. It's that he started off as this, and he's going to be this. He's going to go through this transformation to become what he was always supposed to be. A butterfly is never supposed to be a caterpillar. It's supposed to be a butterfly. A frog is never supposed to be a tadpole. It just is a tadpole until it becomes the frog. Jesus is never simply supposed to be a human being. Jesus is God. And Peter, James, and John got a glimpse of that. Moses got a glimpse of that, and Elijah got a glimpse of that. And we in this whole journey come to this moment today where we get a glimpse of that. We come and we seek this intimacy with Jesus, and we find that we can be totally transformed into something brand new. We find that this relationship is something that we can be a part of, that we can seek this intimacy with, like Moses and Elijah did, like the disciples did. And that it's not going to affect other people so much as it affects us. We are going to come away with a renewed sense of purpose and direction and something totally, totally new as Jesus shows himself as God, as King, as glory incarnate. One last section and then we'll be done. Because this brings everything together. Daniel chapter 7. You don't have to turn with me here. You can write it down, whatever. Because I'm going to start right up. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. As I watched, thrones were set in place. And an ancient one, other translations are going to say the Ancient of Days, took his throne. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. He's light. He is light. He's shining. He's dazzling. He's radiant. He is glory. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and flowed from his presence. There's fire everywhere. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood attending him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. This brings us all the way back to that kingdom of God, of heaven, this future vision. And down to verse 13, as I watched in the night visions, I saw one like a human being coming with the clouds of heaven. Your translation is going to say, the Son of Man, coming from the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient One and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. All of these are like different perspectives of this same moment in time. What Moses and Elijah and this transfiguration is this right here. It's Jesus coming to the Father and being crowned in glory. It's Jesus becoming who he always was supposed to be. It's the King taking the throne for himself. And we see light shining everywhere. We see fire burning everywhere. We see the glory of God everywhere and in all things. And it's up in heaven, and it's out in heaven, and it's back in heaven, and it's here on earth. It's over everything. It's everywhere. It's all the time. It's not something that we have to wait for. It's not something that already happened. It's something that's happening all the time. Jesus is the King on the throne of heaven on earth right now, right here. And what an amazing thing that happens with all of that. And we can be a part of that. We can ascend that mountain just like Moses and just like Elijah and just like Peter, James, and John. We can seek this intimacy with God, and we can be totally changed into fire. We can become something brand new. We can have our relationship with God restored. We can have our relationship with others restored, because that's what this is all about. And we're going to come away with a renewed sense of mission, purpose, and direction. And what's that all about? It always comes back to the Great Commission. And it's not just because I keep throwing that in there. It's because read this passage and then think about the things that Jesus said. Look at what his dominion, his glory, his kingship is all about as Jesus is being crowned in heaven and everything is shining and burning and bright and glory. And understand that this is what Jesus was talking about when he said, all authority has been given to me. Now go. That's what he's giving to us. He's saying, this is for me. This is my glory. And I pour it out and I give it to you. You can tap into it. It won't just be your face shining. You will become as white as light. Now go. You are the same. You get to be Christ to the world. I have given all of this kingship, all of this to you. Now go. And do likewise. Jesus isn't just singing this little kid song when he says, shine your light in the dark. Look at this light. Look at how bright it is. If it were any brighter, which it will be one day, we would explode. And here we are being given that radiance, being given that light, being indwelled with that glory, and told, go. Shine it in that darkness, in those dark places, and show people that they can become part of that light as well, that they can be part of that glory as well. Go and be transformed into a whole new creation. That's what all of this journey has been all about. God in heaven, the King on the throne, heaven on earth, us as citizens and soldiers, us being Christ to the world. All of that comes together so that we can go and continue to be transformed into a whole new creation. So that we can be totally changed into fire. And so that we can become as white as light itself. To spread the glory of God into this world. To show the love of God to all who would see it. Go with all of this for you and for everybody that you come